Could you push another tree down?
Let me tell you a story. My life as it relates to Sasquatch, our next of kin here on Earth. Not because I'm important, but because they are. And because my experience reveals a secret about them that is every bit as mind-boggling as the sheer fact that they exist at all. Here it is. We've been looking in the wrong place all these years, those of us who have longed to make contact with this species. I'm one of a number of researchers who are finally, belatedly catching on. Sasquatch do not live only in the great wilderness regions that remain unspoiled. Many do, but many others spend time right alongside and within territory we have considered strictly our own, successfully operating in our individual and collective blind spot. This documentary is my attempt to demonstrate this startling reality.
In 1973, when I was 12 years old, my family moved to a small Vermont village. Immediately above us was a forested ravine that I used to explore as a teenager, never suspecting a thing. Already fascinated by tales of Sasquatch and by the Patterson film, I, like most, thought that they lived only in the Pacific Northwest. 35 years later, equipped now with more knowledge as a student of the species, I returned to find telltale stick and tree structures. Leaving audio recorders in here, I captured plentiful middle-of-the-night wood knocks and violent tree pushes.
And then, one morning in August of 2014, I tried making overtures and discovered, to my complete surprise, that at least one of them was still here, in the morning, and in the mood to communicate, unseen behind a thick screen of trees. The following August, while distracted by wood knocks and one very bold coyote, I failed to notice a dark little figure spying on me from just 88 feet away, quite literally in my blind spot. Get a load of the entire howl that erupted as soon as I arrived in the ravine that day, so nearby, so emphatic, even frantic. The main reason I didn't notice the small peeping Sasquatch was that, startlingly, the coyote who had just howled approached and stood right in front of me, drawing my eyes away from what I'd been wanting to see my whole life. So I only managed to capture about 4 seconds, and inadvertently, of the visitor, in dim early morning light and not zoomed in. I enhanced the footage later the best I could. We've got our classic conical head, 2 shoulders in view, a left arm, and this would be the left hand. All of this action occurred immediately adjacent to where I just happened to grow up. What does this tell you? For the past 20 years now, I have lived within a stone's throw of this childhood ravine, and in fact, my daughter and I have experienced evidence of Sasquatch visits here as well. In the beginning, we left apples out for them, and then received a stuffed squirrel in our apple tree. This teepee structure appeared just beyond the edge of our yard. One morning, I found my radio antenna bent back and pinned. It took me a while to realize that this was a dead ringer for one of their signature moves, a tree bend pinned down by debris. Another time, videotaping on the trail behind my house, I once again picked up with my camera what eluded my feeble little eyes in real time. Just a handful of frames of what I can only assume is one of the local Sasquatch group. See this dark object appearing in the gap between two trees? In this frame, it is horizontal, while in the next, it is diagonal. His or her body is blocked, but for a split second, we can glimpse the arm. We can even make out some shaggy hair hanging down. Another tantalizing near miss. About half a mile down the trail from here, a perfect five-toed footprint in the mud, bearing the exact traits of thousands of others found across North America. My daughter, now 13, has lost interest in our occasional visitors. This, my darling apathetic child, is a textbook juvenile Sasquatch print. Do you care? Okay. 9.5 inches long by nearly 4 inches wide. A young individual. My cast, the mid-tarsal break is here. You can see. And then the heel just goes and goes and goes and goes. The heel bone, or calcaneus, of our own species is not long like this. Instead, it makes a nearly circular impression. And even more obviously, of course, Sasquatch feet lack an arch, which would show up just here, this being a right foot. I set out audio recorders and captured numerous wood knocks in the middle of the night, and then I recorded these footsteps, which seemed to be made by an individual a lot larger than the one who left the track. So all of that was in the past, and today I'm feeling at a crossroads. I mean, I have adored being a student of the Sasquatch species here in northern Vermont. It's enriched my life immeasurably and made me who I am today to a large extent. But I'm feeling the itch, in fact the deep need, to take my research to the next level. Of course, that can mean many things to different people. For me, it means building past these near misses and finally putting myself into position to experience a Sasquatch encounter and film it at the same time, in real time, as they say. So my plan is to start spending nights with them, hopefully, at least nights in these forests here that I have learned are part of Sasquatch territory and they come back to frequently. You know, it's a little bit awkward because I feel like I'm pushing the boundary,
with them, perhaps invading their private space, even though we share this space, but you could say that at night it's for them. I used to camp out by myself a long time ago. I got kind of spooked. I was snoozing away on top of a small mountain. Whoa. It wasn't till dawn that I could see just how close that tree came to me, just 6.5 feet away. Of all the hundreds of trees within earshot, it was just this one that came down. What can often be an emotionally heavy experience, being out there in the pitch dark and knowing that they're here with you and hearing them and not being able to be certain what their motivations might be. There's very little chance that they're going to kill a person, because if they were doing that, we hear about it if people were being ripped limb from limb. Especially if one goes in peace and just lies there in the dark, vulnerably, and not carrying any weapon, just a good night vision camera. And I'm hoping that my level of fascination will outweigh the level of fear. Granted, it's like a selfish project to capture one of these folks on film, but don't forget that Roger Patterson was nothing if not ego-driven, and it's safe to say that 99% of us are forever grateful that he did what he did. I'm going to start in a spot that I've been researching a lot lately. It's about 12 miles from the ravine and happens to be right beside my own mother's neighborhood. Otherwise, I'd never have checked it out in the first place. Once I took a look, this microforest proved to be chock full of stick and tree structures. But why even pay attention to such formations in the first place? Well, we can agree, I think, that they're not just randomly occurring, that they're either made by our species or by Sasquatch, and that members of our species are not coming in here and wood knocking in the middle of the night year after year. And finally, that the chances of these two strange phenomena, the percussion and the formations, deriving from two entirely different sources, are vanishingly small. All higher primates, including ourselves, of course, manipulate their environment and build structures. Sasquatch possess brains larger than ours, massive strength, fully capable hands, and plenty of time on those hands. Like any intelligent creature, they no doubt enjoy, and likely require, stimulating tasks and projects. Furthermore, territorial marking and other significant sign-making would certainly aid in their group coordination, terrain management, and in their very survival. It would seem implausible then, indeed shocking, if they did not use available forest materials to work with, to make their areas over into something familiar and homelike, with an array of fundamental formations that their species has probably been contouring the land with for eons. For 2 research seasons in preparation, I recorded and listened to more than 850 hours of nighttime audio from this forest, hearing wood knocks and tree pushes aplenty, yes, but also an array of some rather dramatic vocalizations. Here's just one to start off with. Now, in spring of 2020, I choose a perfect little cozy nook at the base of this rock face. After many years of wishing for one, I am finally able to acquire a Generation 3 night vision scope. And I simply duct taped it to my little old camera. These scopes maximize the available light, so they work best under moon and stars. During the first 5 nights, I hear some knocks and whistles, but the first dramatic moment occurs on night 6. Over there, about, 100 feet away. It's 12:39. And luckily I was awake, so I heard that. It probably would have woken me up anyway. Hello? He must have run away. Oh, man. Alright, I'll wait. See what you do next. While I'm distracted by filming through the night vision scope, what I don't hear is what the recorder picks up, an obvious wood knock just 1 minute and 17 seconds after the tree crash. Later that same night, could you push another tree down? 46 minutes later. Thank you. Music to my ears. Now here's a weird and amazing thing. While I was saying thank you, I missed something that the recorder farther away from me picked up. As if to say, well, there, you asked for it, and I did it. This time I happened to be awake when the tree came down, so I was able to hear it from the very first crack, and I was instantly suffused with gratitude. It was one of those super dark nights, which is probably why the individual was so bold, but it gave my night vision scope precious little to work with. So I just settled into the privilege of being there with him or her. What's your name? I'm Chris. My name's Chris. Whew! I think you're young. I'm kind of old. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're glad I'm here too. You're not zapping me, that's a good sign. You're not throwing rocks at me. It's a little bit stressful to be near a Sasquatch, but it's more reassuring. It feels fundamental. This toothy sounding whistle has become a constant on nights with Sasquatch activity. Well, oh my goodness. There's no other tree down except the one from before over there. This area is going to look like a demolition site. This must have been the tree that crashed last night. Oh boy, I had no idea it was so close to where I was sleeping. This is like 30 feet. 30 feet. I mean, no wonder it was so loud and clear on the recorder that was right by me, up on the side of that cliff. Look at this thing. No wonder it made that profound impact. At midnight on August 8th, I make this vocalization. 3.5 minutes later comes an apparent reply. Now you'll hear me say, what's that? Because at the time I didn't hear what came immediately before the vocalized reply. You stand just out of range, of course. It came from down over there. Hello? All the rest of this night I can hear commotion, knocks and branch snaps and chatter over in the same direction, but unfortunately it's too far from either recorder to register well enough to share with you. So on a lark, next time, I set out this compact infrared illuminator. This is on the off chance that Sasquatch, like us, can't see infrared. I'm placing it exactly where all the action seemed to have taken place the last time I slept out here. That night, to my eyes, the forest looks pitch dark in that direction. But to the night vision scope, with the illuminator back there, sure does illuminate. Man, see if that keeps them away. Well, sure enough, no action at all that night. Or the following night. The third time, too, a whole lot of nothing. The next time I visit, I find something brand new. A big cross piece right above my little campsite. This has been yanked down to go underneath this. From below, we can see the angle of this limb. The only other piece of footage I can find that includes it is from May 25th, and you can see that back then it's pointing upward. And now see here, it's not going up into the sky. I haven't touched it. It's been adjusted so that it can go form this X. A fellow local researcher contacts me about a new active site she's found. And it's less than 4 miles from the forest I've been studying. She has captured some astonishing audio, which she generously shares with me. What we're listening to here is definitely a Sasquatch. What other forest creature breathes like this? And also, and finally, just before the visitor leaves this spot, this forest over here is filled with fascinating structures too. Maybe this one is the coolest. On the night she captured the breathing and the tapping, my friend placed a recorder here, atop this structure, 3.5 feet off the ground. The first time I sleep out here by myself, I have a conversation with a very loud, quote-unquote, owl. At 12:58, I'm startled by this call. I reply, "Woo!" At 1:04 comes either a branch break or a knock, I can't quite tell, from the same direction the call came from. At 1:14, it's either a tree push or a very large limb break. Here's a replay. Between 1:16 and 1:19, many back and forths between me and this caller. I just can't tell if this is an owl or not. What's your name? I'm Chris. He or she often answers very, very quickly. Woo! 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 Are you an owl or a Sasquatch? And finally, again, that very strange first call. 4:13 in the morning, and first we get a very assertive knock, and then, right before dawn, more vocalizations and one final knock. A few nights later, back at my primary site, I've decided to switch to the other side of the neighborhood, to the smaller of these two forests, after many fruitless outings in the larger forest, where I made the mistake of setting out the infrared illuminator. I don't arrive until a little past midnight, so I miss all the commotion that took place at 11:19. Luckily, I placed a second recorder earlier in the day. What confirms Sasquatch for me is the clear wood knock we can hear midway through this crazy jamboree. Here's that knock again. More than an hour later, I'm happily sleeping away while somebody approaches. Captured on the recorder right beside me. Conveniently, he signals just what kind of somebody he is. I was extremely startled. I had heard these twigs snapping right next to my head, and I opened my eyes and there was this rounded black shape blocking out the light from houses across the power line cut, and then you can hear him running away. Little Sasquatch are often reported seen moving on all fours, just like little Homo sapiens. So it was right here, big shape. I can't contain it in the frame, but it wasn't bigger than a small bear. I was thinking maybe if it was him who was approaching who also made that knock, he might have done it to see whether I would wake up. And when I still didn't, he felt that the coast was clear to come even closer. And then he went zooming off that way, right up that way. So now I'm confident that I did see a small Sasquatch at very close range that night. But that doesn't really do you any good, so the quest continues for footage. So not far from where I go into the woods, where the little cliff is, I'm seeing this. I went back and got rubber gloves. It's just on the path. The gloves kind of broke. It was right on the path, so either it blew here from anywhere, including from the woods where I have my interactions, or else maybe it was placed here. It could just be a fiber. It doesn't seem like human hair, except if it's like pubic hair or something. Orange-brown color. You put such things in paper instead of plastic because there's a lot less moisture inside an envelope than in a plastic bag, and moisture can degrade DNA very quickly. So we'll figure it out. I've been poking around a lot this spring, finding really cool stuff. Look at the slalom action. It goes this side of this tree, this side of that tree, then it hangs it right again to that tree.
I've been dutifully recording audio in April and so far this May, with just very disappointing results. It always seems to go this way. The weather turns nice, but the action never really gets rolling until later. Then suddenly, it hits me. It's always been in the back of my mind, but once I took a good straight look, it was like, duh. Most of the best edibles in northern Vermont don't reach maturity until June. The woods and fields are chock full of nutritious and vitamin-rich food, increasingly from June onward. I finally looked up this graph of the growing season up here, and, of course, the list goes on, and it doesn't include scores of wild edibles, and that full list would represent only what we can eat. Think of the robust digestive capacity of our cousins, who never domesticated their systems to begin with. Things just become more dynamic.
Could you push another tree down? Meanwhile, let's get a better look at this strange sample. It's very shiny, almost metallic.
I'd buy a digital microscope to take a look at these hairs and see if they might bear a resemblance to those that Mark Zaske has collected in southern Florida. Mark and his wife Melanie have filmed and photographed many Sasquatches. Here's one chewing. You can see a stunning array of their work on the Patreon channel Crypto Reality and featured in the documentary 168 Hours.
This is a good cross section. If you look at the top left-hand side of that image, you can see an amber colored hair. And then behind that, you can see a clear hair. At the bottom across that, you can see the black hair. But we're finding hairs that do not match anything known to science except a polar bear. They're clear. And they're in these samples with multicolored hairs.
It's true about the polar bear hairs. Not only are they clear, but like Sasquatch hairs, they lack a medulla at their core. So far so good, multicolored like Zaske's. To definitively identify these hairs as organic, I need to see what real hairs have on the outside. They're called scales. And in this close-up, we can see them. And to finally nail it down, hair morphology expert Cindy Dosen generously took a look at some strands and provided true microscopic images. It's fascinating, too, that not only are there black and
orange or amber hairs here, but some of their girths are extremely different. Here we have what's either a break at the end of a hair or part of the root or follicle of the hair. If it's the latter, it might be possible to extract some DNA from this. And finally, I see what I've been looking for. I almost missed it because it's clear. Here's another one that's mostly clear with just a hint of that orange hue on the exterior. These hairs do seem to be hollow. I don't see a dark medulla in the middle. I'll be honest, I wish I'd found this sample in a much more compelling situation, say on a structure or right next to a track. But the fact is, I just happened to spot it right here next to the trail leading into the woods. June finally comes and I begin sleeping out again at the little cliff. The desired activity has definitely recommenced. I hear knocks and vocals, and also this repeated bird call, about which more a little later. I'm Chris, remember? We'll make a knock or push down something. A tree, perhaps? What's your name? Don't you want to play? I think you can hear him a little nervous. Middle of the night. This is your time of day, not mine. When I go back to my sleeping spot, I either hear things far away or record them. This one is the best so far this year. It's very intimate. I have the recorder about 150 feet away from me, and you can hear the individual stepping around and knocking. But I keep thinking about that one bird call. I don't think that it's a bird.
Who's poking around over there?
Way back 13 years ago, when I had my first encounter, when a Sasquatch circled me for 6 hours, thumping on the ground and breaking sticks, he also whistled this tune.
Let's talk. I'm awake.
Believe me, I've tried to identify this call as belonging to a known species of bird. The folks in this large Facebook group don't seem to have any idea. The famous night birds are not a match at all. The only dead ringer for at least part of our tune comes from the common oven bird. Now here it is, slowed down to 55% speed. And here's ours, also slowed down the same amount. Pay attention to the middle portion of the tune. You hear that it sounds almost exactly the same, except for tempo. But of course the ovenbird's call never includes the prelude part or the postlude. Also, the bird typically uses 6 or more strokes. It seems the Sasquatch have adopted this run, abbreviated it, and embroidered off of it They even embroider differently sometimes. There's room for improvisation. Here are two instances on June 6th, 3 hours and 17 minutes apart. Notice that the second one adds a little flourish at the very end, like a penny whistle. Another interesting episode of this same tune occurred last year on night 9. I didn't share this with you back when it happened because I was already asking you to pay attention to repeated instances of the toothy whistle and didn't want to overcook the stew. There's just so much to notice. But remember when I requested the tree push and later it happened? Well, the very moment that I asked, this same elaborate call came up not too far away. You can hear it somewhere off behind my voice. Could you push another tree down? That'd be music to my ears. Now here I'll isolate just the higher frequency band so you can hear it better. Could you push another tree down? That'd be music to my ears. The thing is that I've woken up around here on so many mornings to the dawn chorus, and never once in all these years have I heard either the toothy whistle or that very elaborate tune after sunrise. Meanwhile, also in early June, fellow researcher Lisa Fine records a fascinating episode 160 miles away from me in the Catskills. This occurs while she is camping out solo at the base of a mountain. At first, it might seem that the bird calls and the Sasquatch voice are occurring just in parallel, incidental to one another. But pretty soon it becomes clear that they're engaging in something of a call and response sort of conversation, further demonstrating, I think, that Sasquatch often communicate in whistles. I've always suspected that they come down from the north across the river and down past the electric substation. This is anyway the logical crossing point. There are just storage units here and businesses that are of course not open in the middle of the night. Many North American researchers, myself included, have found a correlation between Sasquatch activity and such installations and power line cuts. Taking this route gives them easy access to the forest on both sides of the neighborhood. Tonight, I have placed the 3 recorders like so. Here's the one by me. At 12:14, the north recorder picks up the night's first interesting event. It's pretty faint, so let's brighten it up and take a look at it graphically. It's clearly the same basic tune that we've been paying attention to, with some variations, such as using just 2 of the ovenbird strokes in the middle rather than the usual 4. This signature whistle is audible only on the north recorder, and then, 15 minutes later, this knock is heard only by the south recorder. So sure enough, it seems that the individual is proceeding south toward my particular neck of the woods. I say just one of them because I've listened to the entire audio files from the other two recorders and heard absolutely nothing. This sequence shows just how localized these signals can be and how critical it is to employ several recorders. We can also learn just how careful and deliberate these folks can be. This one took 50 minutes to move a couple hundred yards from first whistle to showing up acoustically right by me. At 1:04, I start hearing taps, knocks, and branch breaks from 30 to 50 feet away, directly across the trail from me.
Are you over there?
It's pitch black tonight, which no doubt allows for this great proximity, but unfortunately, where I've positioned them, the two thermal cameras are not aimed in the right direction. The reason I have one of them trained on me is, well, in case I get snuck up on again like last fall. The camera that's by me is the night vision scope, and it needs sufficient ambient light to see anything. I'm afraid to get up to move them, crunching around blindly, lest I put a sudden halt to this wonderful visit. So I'm kind of stuck, but enjoying listening to the show nonetheless.
Something's going on up in the tree. Have you been throwing stuff up in the tree?
The obvious projectiles keep landing in the leaves and branches
Stick brick.
for more than 2 hours. I'm only playing a few seconds for you out of all that audio.
Did you throw something?
Meanwhile, the wood play continues nearby. When I make a squeaking sound with my lips, I get an almost immediate reply. Now, I know that barred owls can make all kinds of calls, but there's an uncanny resemblance between my call and this response. I'll focus on this strange and very intriguing pop sound. It comes up a lot, and it's important, so I'll give a few examples. It can sometimes serve as a key to interpreting whether something is or is not Sasquatch audio. Leaning again on my friend Lisa Fine's research down in the Catskills, let's listen to a close encounter between a Sasquatch and the recorder that she hung out. Remember last year when I asked for a tree to be pushed down and then a while later it was? And that then right after there was what I'm thinking of as the post-action sign-off. Now this year I had another tree pushed down about 25 feet from me, and this too was followed by a sign-off. But this time it was, you guessed it, I had just finished setting up my sleeping area and then lay down and said,
Okay, the show's all yours.
As so often happens, I don't hear something at the time that we can now pick up. Nor is this trait or tendency limited geographically to the Northeast or even to the eastern portion of North America. Another friend and researcher, Thomas Potter, has obtained wonderful recordings in the high Sierra Mountains. Keep an ear out for the pops. I think what they're doing is something like this. And what other animal in the forest does that? Now we can circle back to that wild scene I recorded on night 59 and read it like a book. Not only do you have your bipedal footsteps and your knock, but you have two distinctive and identifying pops. And what does this Sasquatch have in his hand for a midnight snack? A bird. I'd say likely a turkey. Now we can sit back and just enjoy this part, knowing for certain that it is the voice of a Sasquatch mid-hunt. I decide to relocate and see what a fresh spot may hold. Right here by this structure. Besides the recorder I take with me, I've pre-planted 3 more in a string. The first one is propped up here on this limb that's been jammed into the ground. Pretty deep. The second one is here by this quartz rock. Here's where I recorded that casual stepping around and knock a couple months ago. Then the third is at the edge of this cliff. They like to lay things in parallel against rock faces and boulders. Hey! This fox comes up on me at 4:42 a.m., all agitated and squawking. I've only ever seen foxes running away before. Every time I think he must have gone, I take a look, and there he still is. He paces in a half circle again and again between me and the terrain to the north. And he does so for 41 minutes. At some point, this sheer strangeness makes me remember, when have I seen another canid acting all forward and persistent like this? Well, 6 years ago in the ravine. So now I scan my perimeter in case this little assistant too is covering for a wayward Sasquatch child. This is just a rock that's absorbed heat during the day. But when I review the footage, it turns out, no, it's not a rock. Plus, I mean, why would this rock still be warm after a whole long chilly night? Before I zoomed in and focused on it, the camera picked up movement. A sort of creeping motion, first from left to right, and then from right back to left. There's no way to tell, of course, if this is a Sasquatch belly crawling, but I'd say it's a lot more likely with the fox displaying this bizarre behavior than it would be otherwise. I need to rewind the night. The microphones arrayed out behind him may tell the story. An hour before I get there, a knock, picked up strongly by all three recorders. And then, at 4:42, registered at the rock face and nowhere else, because too subtle, the same tap-tap that we've noticed before. Here I need to tell you that I always synchronize the recorders perfectly, using a call I do upon arrival. I just match them up on the audio tracks. The double tap occurs up here at 4:41 and 47 seconds. Seven seconds. Hey! After hours of silence, 7 seconds between the tap-tap and the sentry rudely announcing himself for the first time. A signal inaudible to any but the closest microphone and to one pair of sharp, pointy ears. I wouldn't conclude that this was a cue if it weren't for what happened at the end of the night. So I'm lying here, waiting for dawn, and my minder is still hanging around, still scolding me. And then, out of the blue, a knock from up the hill to my west. And then, after this, no more Mr. Fox. This is a perfect example of how Sasquatch hide, even in pitch dark. A few years ago, when thermal cameras finally became affordable for the average researcher, we all thought, hey, this will change the game entirely. When they think they're invisible, enveloped in perfect darkness, we'll be able to just look at them thanks to their heat signatures. My experience tonight underscores the truth that it's just damn hard to see a Sasquatch, even with excellent night vision and with putting yourself in the right place at the right time. By the way, I didn't mention this before because, again, so much information to pack in, but back in the ravine in 2014, just before the coyote confronted me, when I first heard him upon arrival, I also heard 4 wood knocks. Down in the Catskills, Lisa Fine has recorded a Sasquatch yelling along with a pack of coyotes. Coyotes. Many have speculated that they and Sasquatch are so-called collaborator species. I bet they're like what dogs are to us, companions. And I bet they hunt together. That would only make sense. As a matter of fact, I've been able to capture Sasquatch calls in the company of coyotes on several occasions. First, here is bioacoustics expert Monongahela commenting on one of my recordings.
In the beginning of these vocals, you'll hear an oo phoneme, as in boot, oo, and it transitions into an ah phoneme, as in father. So ooh, ah, you can hear that plainly in these last 2 vocalizations.
Canids, such as coyotes and wolves, are unable to produce this ooh-ah phoneme shift. Here's another of my recordings of this telltale Sasquatch style. Now, bringing the coyotes back into the picture, we can hear the ooh-ah call mixed in with the higher-pitched chorus. And now another kind of Sasquatch vocalization. A solitary male yelling in the middle of the night in the middle of the woods. With this deep tone of voice lodged in our ear, here is an individual yelling along with the coyote pack in the ravine. Because that fox seemed so angry, and maybe his Sasquatch was too, I set out a sort of peace offering, which reminds me of a whole other approach that can work. Communication through objects. As I mentioned, I've been privileged with some of this at my house over the years. And it did lead to this one precious glimpse. Much, much more came out of another situation where for years household items were borrowed, stolen, and rearranged. The East Texas home of a woman who has seen and heard Sasquatch many times on her property, almost exclusively after dark. This is what's known as a habituation site, a place where Sasquatch visitation is a regular occurrence and where both species become just a touch more familiar with one another, where they let their guard down slightly. While visiting her, one evening in 2008 with a borrowed thermal camera, I shot this brief footage, unaware of the subject crouching just 35 feet away behind a woodpile. We can plainly make out the eyes here giving off more heat, and the comparatively cooler top of the head. This individual was peeking at us or spying on us through a small opening in the pile of old lumber, while we roasted hot dogs and marshmallows at a bonfire. We can see the left hand cupping the end of this pointed board and twice sort of thrusting out and down with its fingers and wrist. As I found out that night, habituation sites provide a ripe venue in which to see or film a Sasquatch because of the reliably ongoing interaction taking place. For it turns out that although our next of kin are still careful here to maintain their distance and concealment, it is quite possible to communicate with them, not face-to-face in real time, but asynchronously, in a sort of syncopated rhythm, a back-and-forth game, a long-form conversation mediated through objects. The leading figure in documenting this kind of experiment is a woman in Ohio who goes by Snow White Bigfoot. She has been posting videos chronicling her process for 5 years, totaling more than 80 hours of so-called diary entries, showing the sometimes subtle, sometimes astonishing moves made by her local Sasquatch group.
Look what's here. That is a new gift. And it's blue. And it's with all this blue stuff that I have had out for quite a while. I told you they color associate. My group seemed very sweet and gentle and kind and fair. It's just, things that I would have never thought.
How do you get that sense?
Well, they'll take things and then they bring them back.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they have respect for your property. Sometimes they would just take one item, like one cookie, and they'll leave the other one. They like order and organization, and they like symmetry. And they're really detail-oriented, too. So your theory about the autistic savant connection and all that seems pretty accurate to me.
And also there's an element of obsessive compulsive disorder. Like we wouldn't want to pretend to diagnose them like that, but it seems similar to what OCD is like. I mean, for instance, they put your magnetic metal bowl, they move it from the porch railing to underneath the hood of your grill, and they've done that, 50 times?
Oh, yeah. It's like the favorite thing.
Like, no, it goes here, and you put it back. No,
Yeah.
it goes here.
Sometimes it's upside down, sometimes it's right side up.
And sometimes it's got some things in it. And I mean, it's so interesting to me to contrast that kind of behavior with the popular image of them as like monsters, you know?
I don't look at them like that anymore. I mean, I used to be kind of afraid of them and stuff, but I still have a healthy fear of them, but I just don't have that image of them anymore.
Yeah. I mean, monsters brings to mind a kind of a creature that's out of control, and that's really the opposite of what Sasquatch turn out to be like.
So on my piece of paper is a gift. It's a chain. It's right under my picture and my name, so I feel like this is definitely meant as a gift for me. I have the best Bigfoots. I just love them.
And you get a lot of objects that you've never seen before that you can only assume come from your neighbors' houses. How close are you to the nearest town?
It's 4 miles. Jim's parents live right at the edge of that town, and they've heard lots of vocalizations, and that's why I put that wrench out there.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so
you put a wrench at his parents' house, and you put a piece of black tape around it so that you could identify it, and sure enough,
it made its way back to my house.
Was it like
the grill?
2.5 months later?
Yeah, I believe it was.
Probably give the neighbors some of your things.
I've wondered about that. Yeah, I wonder if there's somebody out there exchanging gifts with them too.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of those chess grandmasters that play simultaneously against 16 opponents. It could be that they have this whole, you used the word circuit the other day, this whole circuit of travel, and over the years they figure out what people are interested in playing the game, and they'll play with them, and they'll play with them and them and them, and oddly, people don't talk to each other. You haven't talked to your neighbors about this.
No.
And your neighbors haven't talked to you about this, and it's very likely that of the 500 people in a certain radius around your house, 40 of them or 30 of them or something like that are aware of the presence of Sasquatch, and just never compare notes.
As far as interaction with them, probably my favorite thing that happened was that they brought me this, I guess they're called a super ball. It's like a multicolored ball. And I found it out on the railing. I came back in, I got my camera, and I went back out to take a picture of it. And when I went to pick it up, I heard a vocalization come from the woods, just at the edge of our property, not real far away. It was like a woo. And then I picked it up, went to the edge of the yard near the woods over there, and I started talking to him. I told him thank you and how much I loved the ball, and I held it to my chest, you know. It's like, it's so awesome. I love it. And then they vocalized at me again, the same type of woo. It feels like a really great privilege to be able to interact with something that most people don't even believe exists, and you know it does exist. And it's brought a lot of joy to my life.
Sasquatch seem relentlessly ghost-like, yes, and 99.9% of the time they are. But every once in a great while, they do make mistakes. Recently, Snow White Bigfoot and her husband left the garage door open, and then found a bunch of their stuff knocked down and strewn about. They also found many oily prints left here and there on the car.
And then on the other side of the car is this beautiful forearm. It just seems to me like a bigger one was carrying a smaller one, and it was kind of like all over the car, leaning and playing and stuff. I'm so excited. Wow. This to me looks like hair coming down. It even shows a callus. I've never seen a Bigfoot arm in person, but to me this is almost like looking at one of the arms. This callus shows up really good here. And it's right where you would think it would be on an elbow. Then you get all this detail. You can even see skin. You can see muscle tone. And I believe up in here, you can see the dermal ridges on the hand. And this is either hair or it's where it moved its hand. But to me, it looks like hair. Look at the arm structure, how similar. This is in reverse on the car. And whenever you're looking at these comparisons, you got to remember that a Bigfoot is not a gorilla or a chimp, and it's also not a human. So it will have similarities, but it's not going to be exactly like either one. The detail on this is so similar to this, like everything down to the callus on the elbow, here on the ape, and the callus on the Bigfoot. And you can also see the little bumps, hair follicles, and the shadow is in the same spots. That shows the muscle.
Now you might think that this exquisite physical evidence is the best a person could hope for. But one fine day, Snow White tried something new, walking along the edge of her yard beside the tall grass in broad daylight, and shooting video back over her shoulder. Reviewing the footage, she noticed a dark patch and, zooming in, quickly realized it was one of her local group pressed against the ground on its belly. Working frame by frame, she identified a face and fingers, and then was able to locate the best angle and sharpen the high-definition image in the raw file. Astonishingly, for just a handful of frames, maybe a second's worth, the face is right out in the open. Great big nose. The right eye shows both iris and sclera, the white part. We can also see the first 3 fingers of the right hand. Black nails reflecting sunlight. And when we roll the frames, these fingers are moving. Suddenly, after 5 years of immaculate invisibility, Snow White's visitors now took on physical form, becoming concretely real, if only for the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, back in Vermont, I decide to put a bookmark in my study of the twin forests over here and return to the spot almost 4 miles away that bore such exciting fruit last year. Woo! Woo! Are you an owl or a Sasquatch? First, near 2 gorgeous structures, I record a night of audio, placing one unit tucked in a crevice in this stump, and the other about 100 yards away at higher elevation, up beside this tree loop and leaner. What happens next down at the stump takes 11 minutes to unfold. I'm compressing it down to a little over a minute. If I made you listen to the whole thing, you would see just how extremely deliberate and conservative the approach and the interaction with the recorder is. It starts out with 2 very tentative, cautious wood knocks. What we hear now at the very end, right before the visitor departs, is a vocalization that I never would have attached to Sasquatch, and if it were not for what led up to it, I would never believe that it could be. You got a plum, got a nectarine, and an apple that I've taken a bite out of, which is supposed to signify that we're sharing and that it's good to eat, not poison or something. Somebody took them all. I plant the recorder out by the stump, 120 feet from the night vision scope. Several times through the night there is percussion, but the drummer is not visible. Maybe there's just not enough ambient light. Also, there is some fog up here tonight, which diffuses what moonlight there is. You can tell he's pretty close, though, just lost in the murk. From the sky, geese flying south, and then, 5 seconds later, from ground level, an attempted imitation. I mean, just how astonishing is it that there is so much fruitful territory to cover just within this one 13-mile circle that I've chosen to focus on because I happen to live here. And in 13 years, I've only really dug into 4 separate spots. I've barely scratched the surface. Why would any avid student of the species ever travel outside such rich home ground? Think of this. Jane Goodall spent half a century in the Gombe Stream Nature Reserve, assiduously documenting her target species, continuing to learn more and more. And I'd argue that chimpanzees are incalculably less complex, subtle, and profoundly fascinating than Sasquatch. Though they've long been touted as our closest living relatives, they are in fact far more primitive and distantly removed from us than our genuine next of kin here on Earth. Dr. Jeff Meldrum and others have estimated the total Sasquatch population across North America at somewhere around 5,000. My experience just here would strenuously argue otherwise. It's been a case study, a spot check, a proof of concept. If those individuals that I've encountered here in this circle were merely passing through on their way elsewhere, I wouldn't have been able to document and experience them, often on multiple successive nights, for months on end. No, they're raising families and forging histories here. It is my contention that we can extrapolate from what I have found here across all similar habitats of similar size. And in doing so, it's clear that overall numbers, continent-wide, must be vastly greater than 5,000, at least in the hundreds of thousands. Since crossing the Bering Land Bridge, the species has had many thousands of years to naturally spread across all viable habitat. And since this habitat evidently includes even forests right beside Homo sapiens, there is no reason to imagine any hard limits on an essentially even distribution throughout North America. I would literally bet all my money and my house that there are at least 5,000 in Vermont alone. They announce their presence just about everywhere. If we have eyes to see and ears to hear, their signals are loud and clear, and yet we collectively fail to comprehend the startling implications of this. You too, of course, can find and foster adventure with members of this fellow human species. If you live near forests in North America, you have a Gombe of your own right in your backyard. This whole idea of Sasquatch hotspots, few and far between, is nothing but a low information myth. All suitable spots will heat up with enough patience and time. Just identify the flags that they have planted in their territories, record these spots night after night, verifying that these are indeed Sasquatch flags, and then go one of two ways. You can find interesting objects and kick off a conversation with these folks, or else you can spend nights out there. Either way, you will have an unbelievable amount of fun in the journey itself, and if you give it your best, it will eventually pay off. It all comes down to whether or not you truly want to. Do you want to? The night vision scope works best under a full moon, so I've decided to film my arrival, really just for the sake of some pretty B-roll footage. A little past midnight on September 20th, I'm reporting for duty. I think I just heard a wood knock. Something I've never heard while walking into this site. It comes from the exact direction I'm headed. When I come up to this one particular spot, I'm startled by commotion to my left, something thumping on the ground. As if to get my attention. Hello? Hello? Are you here? Just staring right out at me, not bolting like a bear cub, say, would do. Hello? There's a lot we can pick up on this video that I did not notice at the time. Here he is moving some leaves out of the way from our right to left. Or could it even be a wave? I can see you. Next, he turns and shimmies up the tree. This is his left leg, glinting in the moonlight. In trying to reposition myself for a better angle, I lose him for a while. Where are you? I think I see you. Hello. It only makes sense, right, that the visual experience here would be rather indirect and obscured. After all, that's the nature of the beast, almost without exception. we can make out the fuzzy hair on, I think, his back. Now, here he makes a move I'm not sure how to interpret, but to me this looks like an elbow, and this looks like his hand. And what I guess he's doing is taking something and stuffing it into his mouth. Fuzzy arm and pointy elbow here. Finally, and I'm guessing this is the top of his head. There you are. Some more wispy hair. Lovely in the moonlight. What happens next is a little embarrassing. I dash back to the trail to swap this camera for my thermal camera, thinking to get better detail. And, of course, when I get back to the tree just a few seconds later, the little guy is gone. Gone, gone, gone. A few things. Why didn't this one bolt like the little one who came up on me last year? Perhaps it's for the same reason that this one alerted me with that light knock at first, and then thumped rather insistently right beside me, without which I'd have just strolled on by. Apparently, and very strangely, he wanted an up-close interaction.
So here's the tree where it all happened last night. Those are the leaves that he or she hid behind. I was filming from this angle, so it's really lucky I was able to capture anything at all back there through these branches. If I had only taken 3 steps to my right, I would have had this much clearer shot and could have seen his hands and arms grabbing onto those low branches. But hey, I am not complaining.
So, setting the apple tree at 8 inches, we can rough out a size estimate. Across this way, she's about 2.4 feet. And down from head to foot, just shy of 4 feet. But keep in mind that the leg here in the foreground is bent, so she'd be a good deal above 4 feet standing upright. The very peculiar thing that she does here is she places her knees up against the tree trunk and then hoists herself up with her arms. She sort of gathers herself here at the base of the tree and then doesn't use her legs at all except to sort of stabilize her on her way up. Turns out you need a lot of upper body strength to do what that one did.
They must have just dropped down while I was away back up to the trail to get the thermal camera. Dropped right down here and beat it into the field. And you can see there's a well-defined trail squished down through the grass here. And I see oh yes, perfect. And then tons of very, very thick growth back there with plenty of little rooms, hiding places, sleeping places.
I'm sure you're sick by now of sound analysis, but I have to do it one more time because there's something I certainly didn't hear at the time. It didn't pop out at me, so to speak, until I listened back through the audio with headphones. I'm going to bring this signal forward as much as I can. It happens throughout our encounter, but I'll play you just a few examples.
I can see your fuzzy hair. You hiding?
She sure doesn't seem at all agitated, but comfortable. Maybe because of knowing my behavior. Three nights later, after the audio confirmed that she or he had been under the apple tree both of the last 2 nights, I come back with the thermal camera. I didn't really think about this the other night, because I was just so delighted and charmed by the fact that he was there and didn't mind me getting close and filming him. He essentially said, "Hey, I'm over here." This is so bizarre and lucky. I mean, what a surprise, right? Seems like I didn't have to violate their boundary, their privacy after all. It was one of them, in the end, who reached out and invited me across the threshold. But since then, my thoughts have turned to his parents, or her parents, and the group. And I'm wondering, to what extent doing what I'm doing is actually very dangerous. When I arrive at the tree, nothing. Except out in the little field behind the tree, I notice a heat signature. Is that you? I won't hurt you. Coming from down in the tall grass. I'm just about to bite the bullet and go take a look at it when something happens that I've heard about 100 times from other researchers but never experienced myself. My camera, my brand new $3,000 thermal camera, goes completely haywire. Oh my God. It's malfunctioning in some way. Yeah. No, it's just not showing me anything. Oh. I'm gonna get out of here. The boundary between our society and theirs is extremely thin and porous. Even when you're trying to capture them on video, if you make yourself vulnerable, put yourself out there, commit to your friendly overtures and to your peaceful occupation of shared space, they will occasionally give in to their curiosity and turn the tables, seeking contact with you. When the standoff does crack, it will probably be the children who leak through, as has happened here 3 times already. I can hardly consider this a fluke anymore, but rather the reliable outcome of a method applied patiently over time. It may not take you 68 nights. It may take you more. Go with a partner if you'd rather. Oh, they'll push trees down nearby and yell at you, expecting you to run home terrified. But stay put. Be grateful when they make their presence known. It's a privilege just to be in their company. If you stick to the plan, they will have to respect your conviction. They will eventually come into view. As the author of your own quest story, you can forge a personal relationship with Sasquatch. It is, after all, a family relationship, an ancient kinship, at once intimate and remote.
I think Bigfoot is blurry. That's the problem. And that's extra scary to me because there's a large, out-of-focus monster roaming the countryside.
Whoa, Jesus!
Bigfoot has some brothers, you know, they're going to come after you too.
Or his babies, whatever.
Yeah.
Big Mama and Bigfoot, watch out.
I've never been drawn to this topic because I'm rational.
In Vermont? He could be anywhere. Why would he be here? Why would anybody be here?
All right, I'm gonna put my hand up for how tall he was, all right?
It's your one life. And what are you going to do next? Start talking about the earth being flat?
It's like 20 feet.
As soon as I get my license, I'm out of here.